They asked Sheriff Palmer at that point in time to come down to Harney County and make a stand, and he said that that was not his place. He wasn't going to do that, and he was going to talk with Sheriff Ward at that point in time, and who he said he had a good working relationship with. So it looked like the guys there at the refuge wanted to branch out and go to Grant County and talk to those people there, and law enforcement of Harney County and the federal law enforcement did not want that, as well as state, did not want that to take place, and they saw their opportunity to make a move there. Definitely concerning.
Well, may I bring up something here, and then I will have Sheriff Mack address that. I believe right now, even though what you cited are completely factual, the fact that we are being put in this place, in this position of having to even justify any kind of association with anybody who's protesting, and in this case, the protesters didn't resort to any violence. The only violence that took place during that protest was the one that was basically instigated by the federal agents and the state agents, okay? You're looking at the state troopers per order of the governor in Oregon. And just the fact that with this fear factor, they're putting people in this place, in this position, that we have to say, well, you know something? We are journalists, and even though we were covering these people and the protests, we didn't talk to them and we didn't interview them. And can you imagine journalists start saying that? So that itself is un-American. And I think psychological warfare ends up being exactly this. When people start feeling this fear, they become defensive, and in order to protect their liberties, they have to say, I'm not associating with these groups that the federal government may deem, and at that point, they were not on any most wanted list. So what you said is absolutely correct, Spiro, but I think the fact that a lot of people are feeling to, have this pressure to say, I was not reading about them, I was not covering them, I did never associate or I never interviewed them, that alone says the kind of a path they have placed us on, the path we have been as a country, and that's the part that needs to change. And I'm so glad to come across the association that has been set up, put together by Sheriff Mack, and some wonderful plans they have to say enough is enough, because either the government, and I guess with the consent of the majority, have to declare that the Constitution of the United States has been suspended, okay? And then get over with it. But we can't go and say we are operating under the rule of law, and our rule of law being the United States Constitution, and then behave this way as the public, as the people of the United States, and have a government that behaves this way. Now, that's the macro picture we should be countering, and I think our viewers and us, of course, we would like to hear from Sheriff Mack what he has been doing and what he's planning to do with hundreds of sheriffs across the nation who are saying enough is enough, and they are ready to stand up. And I'm so glad that there's at least one segment that is doing that, because we have had people in the academia writing about it. We have seen groups like ACLU for the past few decades keep bringing lawsuits in federal courts. None of them really stick. Well, it's time for action. And now I look at this association and I say, you know what? I like what I see and I like what I hear. And I would like Sheriff Mack to tell us more about what they are planning to do and why they have formed this association. Sheriff?
Well, primarily we formed it because what Thomas Jefferson said about when all government shall be drawn to Washington as the center of all power, will render powerless the checks provided. In other words, our Constitution. Just as you talked about, suspending the Constitution, which the federal government basically has already done. And then that government will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated. My point in my book, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope, my point in that book is plain and simply, to whom can the people of America turn for peace, safety, protection, and liberty when our federal government has become so venal and oppressive? It is exactly emulating the policies and ruthlessness of one King George III back in 1776. So we have fought a revolutionary war to stop this kind of behavior from government, and now the media and a lot of other people in this country are trying to embrace such as commonplace, and I won't do that. And so the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, and by the way, we'd like all of you to become members and do so at cspoa.org. Everybody listening to this, including the two of you participating, would love to have you as members. This is a grassroots effort. We want everybody to participate in this, all citizens, all law enforcement, all public officials, to where we stop suing the federal government, stop asking federal courts if I have the permission from them to keep my oath of office, and to stand for what's right, and to prevent crimes from the federal government occurring in my county. Why do we have to ask permission to do that? We already swore an oath to do it. Quit asking permission, stop suing, start doing, and stand for what's right. Now, another hypocritical and ironic situation that exists here is everything they have accused Sheriff Palmer of doing, Sheriff Ward did to the 10th power. I mean, he did worse than Sheriff Palmer's being accused of. Sheriff Ward in Harney County, where all of this took place, none of this took place in Sheriff Palmer's county. And so if he talks to these people, why not? These people were allowed by the federal government and the sheriff's office and the state of Oregon. The occupiers were allowed to come and go as they pleased. They went into church. They went to town hall meetings. They held town hall meetings. They went to talk to the FBI. They had at least 2 meetings with Sheriff Ward. There's a picture on the internet with Ammon Bundy shaking hands with Sheriff Ward. Why didn't Sheriff Ward just grab him by the hand and take him to jail and tell him he's under arrest? Sheriff Ward never tried at all to place them under arrest. So why is it that Sheriff Palmer is being criticized for anything when Sheriff Ward did nothing except talk to these people? And that's what Palmer is being accused of. So what if they talk to him? Sheriff Ward allowed them to come and go as they pleased. What would be the big deal if anybody talked to them? They were certainly allowed to go into restaurants and to church. And so, you know, it gets a little bit ridiculous when, as Thomas Paine said, we punish on the one hand and pardon on the other. And that's why this is so obviously a political move, whether it's by the federal government or local politics. I don't really know, but it stinks to high heaven of politics. And so it's, the whole thing is just absolutely absurd and ridiculous. And so why don't they go after Sheriff Ward? And not only that, if Sheriff Ward had taken action, these people inside there, including the Bundys, said that the sheriff has ultimate power. They should have put that to the test. And I said that to Sheriff Ward personally. And he had met with Ammon Bundy before they occupied. So he already knew Ammon Bundy, and he knew how Ammon Bundy felt about the power of the sheriff. And then Sheriff Ward refused to investigate them or to arrest them or to tell them to get lost. And Sheriff Ward had complete inaction that I believe led to the death of Lavoy Finicum. And so why didn't he do anything, and why aren't they going after him? Well, you have to know the difference. The only difference between Sheriff Ward and Sheriff Palmer is that Sheriff Palmer is a constitutional sheriff and Sheriff Ward is not. That's the only difference. But they both met with these people, and I will tell you that Sheriff Ward did so in much greater extent than did Sheriff Palmer.
Yes, you're absolutely right. This is why they're going after Sheriff Palmer at this point, is because he is a constitutional sheriff, the way I see it. And that'd be the federal government and the federal courts going after Palmer. Ward has been accused of being a yes man, a yes sir man to the federal government, to the BLM, the FBI. So essentially, I mean, that's why they were throwing pennies out in front of his office out there, saying that he sold out.
Yeah, let me add something there. That is true, and I was there at that point when we did that, and it was a very beautiful protest and rally. It wasn't a protest. Well, it was a protest and rally for the Hammonds, who have been obviously charged criminally by our own criminal federal government. And I will tell you that when I was sheriff, and many other sheriffs across this country have experienced the same thing from the Forest Service and the BLM, who have had controlled burns that have got out of hand and that have burned private property as well as public property, and they've burned down half the side of our mountain because of their ineptness in executing controlled burns. And controlled burns are necessary to properly maintain a forest. And so here again, Thomas Paine looks prophetic when he says, why do we pardon on one hand and punish on the other? Why hasn't, in all the dozens, if not hundreds of cases where the federal government has done exactly what the Hammonds have gone to prison for? And the Hammonds, you need to understand, everybody listening to this program needs to understand, they were already charged, they were already tried and convicted, they had already served time in prison, a few months to a year for both Steve and Dwight, and they had already paid $400,000 in fines, and all the other ranchers there who loved the Hammonds so much got together and raised the money for their ability to pay the fines. These were friends and neighbors of the Hammonds who raised that money. All the fines have been paid, they had served their time, and then the federal government comes in and says, well, we can make all this go away if you'll just give up your land. And so they refuse to do that, and then the next thing you know, they've got some idiot judge to say, oh yeah, they didn't get enough. Well, the first judge said this would be cruel and unusual punishment, a violation of the Eighth Amendment, if these defendants were put in jail for the time that that the federal government wanted in the first place. So he refused to do it. And then they go around that judge, go to the most liberal overturned court in America, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and they say, oh yeah, send them back to prison more. That wasn't enough. Well, then we need every sheriff, and I'm challenging every sheriff to look at the times in their counties all across this country when the BLM has done controlled burns that have gotten out of control. And I also want the EPA arrested and charged the agents that allowed the toxic waste to be dumped into the Colorado and Animas rivers in Colorado just a few months ago. So let's start getting serious about this, and let's charge everybody equally on all of these crimes.
No, I'm glad that you summed up the case and summed it up really beautifully, because what we have been seeing with the mainstream media has been exactly the opposite. With the protests starting, with the occupation, they tried to put everyone in the same bucket, okay? And what they did, they handpicked, probably people who were there for that reason, we're not sure, 2 or 3 cartoonish characters, and they have been trying to show these 3 characters as the representative of the dissent for the entire segment. And by portraying them as, you know, a bunch of crazy people with machine guns, and they're the racists, and they're the sexist, and they're the xenophobics, and they're the, you know, and in the past it has been successful, why not? And we haven't seen any honest, frank portrayal of the ranchers' issues, Hammond's issues. For example, your group, we are looking at hundreds of sheriffs. These are the law enforcement in the country, people. These are not some criminal thugs who are really